Welcome to Cheating Web Stories. We've got a thrilling story for you today, and we hope you love it, so sit tight and let's get into the story. As the evening descended over Seattle, Ethan Collins stood by his office window, gazing at the city's skyline as it slowly darkened. His phone screen continued to glow with a notification, which should have been the highlight of his week. After 15 years in military intelligence and another 5 years building his own security consulting firm, he had finally secured a major cybersecurity contract under the Department of Defense's initiative. It was the moment he had been working towards for weeks. However, instead of feeling triumphant, his mind kept wandering back to the little things that were troubling him at home. Minor changes, subtle shifts, like the way his twin daughter's laughter had grown quieter, or the way Candace's habits with her phone seemed to change recently. Where most people might have dismissed these as everyday changes, Trevor, a man who had survived 3 military tours by trusting his instincts, couldn't ignore them. His instincts always kept him alert, warning him that something was off. Suddenly, his office intercom buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Roth, Detective Ivy Cohen is here for your security consultation," his assistant Angela informed him. "Send him up," Trevor replied, straightening his tie, pushing his thoughts aside, and shifting into professional mode. Detective Cohen was exactly as Trevor had expected from their phone conversation. Sharp eyes, a simple yet professional suit, and the measured movements of someone who had seen far too much to take anything at face value. The first hour was spent discussing vulnerabilities in the police department's cybersecurity system. But soon enough, Cohen brought up a more intriguing topic. "You know, Roth, your name came up in a recent insurance fraud case. I was working on a case not too long ago involving a guy who staged his own death to collect insurance," Cohen continued. "Some people think they can cheat the system, but they never do." Cohen's words set off alarm bells in Trevor's mind. Candace's sudden interest in their finances over the past few months had struck him as odd. While this could simply be a coincidence, Trevor's finely tuned instincts suggested otherwise. After Cohen left, Trevor checked his calendar. His twin daughters, Emma and Sarah, were spending the evening at Uncle James's place. Candace's friendship with James had evolved in recent months. Although it had started about 5 years ago at a charity event through Trevor's sister, Lorraine, it had grown deeper lately. In the past few weeks, Trevor had noticed changes in his wife's behavior, the way she became more secretive with her phone and how frequently she brought up James in casual conversation. All of this, combined with James's increased involvement with their daughters, painted a picture that Trevor couldn't quite ignore. Arriving home, Trevor sensed a strange tension in the air. His daughters were sitting at the dining table, pushing around pieces of orange chicken on their plates. Candace was on the couch, her eyes glued to her phone, fingers typing away. When Trevor entered the room, Sarah greeted him with a smile that seemed forced, while Emma averted her gaze. "So, how was your day with Uncle James?" Trevor asked in a light-hearted tone, trying to gauge their reactions. Sarah glanced at Candace before replying, "We just played games." But Trevor noticed Emma's unease. Her fingers fidgeted near the edge of her plate, and her eyes blinked rapidly, a clear sign she was hiding something. "James bought them some art supplies they wanted," Candace added, still not lifting her eyes from her phone. Trevor observed the slight hesitation in Emma when James's name was mentioned. After dinner, Trevor helped the girls with their homework while Candace took a call in the garden. Months ago, Trevor had discreetly installed a high-sensitivity microphone there when late-night calls started becoming a regular occurrence. Tonight's conversation would be added to the growing collection of evidence he was gathering. When the girls were finally asleep, Trevor retreated to his home office. Although he had the new government contract to work on, he instead checked the security logs on his laptop. Someone had accessed his system in his absence. The searches were clumsy but revealing. queries about life insurance policies, accidental death versus homicide claims, and maximum payout conditions. His suspicions deepened. He quickly pulled up old security camera footage from a visit to James's house 2 months ago for a consultation. He noticed that Candace's car had been there 4 times last week, not the 2 times she had mentioned. The internal footage was even more revealing. It showed James pacing in his study, speaking on the phone. "Candy, these things take time." James's voice came through clearly. At that very moment, Trevor received a notification on his screen from the girl's room. Sarah was tossing and turning in her bed, clearly troubled. Just as he was about to check on her, he noticed Emma crawling into Sarah's bed, wrapping her arms around her sister. "It's okay," Emma whispered softly. "We don't have to keep secrets forever." Trevor's fists clenched in rage. His daughters were now burdened with secrets they should never have had to bear. They shouldn't have tolerated any games, but Candace and James involved the girls in their schemes, which turned out to be their biggest mistake. The next morning, Trevor adjusted his approach. He began personally taking the girls to school to regain their trust. During these drives, he asked them about their friends, teachers, and dreams, but deliberately avoided any mention of James. He let the girls share information willingly, without pressure. A week went by, and Trevor collected more evidence and recorded several conversations. He noticed his wife's facade slowly starting to crack. Candace no longer asked him about his day or pretended to be interested in his new project. She started taking more client calls, which always seemed to happen when Trevor was at work. Then one night, everything changed. During bedtime stories, Trevor was reading The Paper Bag Princess, Sarah's favorite book, when Emma suddenly began crying. "Daddy," she sobbed. Trevor put the book aside and kept his voice gentle. "You can never be bad, sweetheart. What's wrong?" Sarah joined her sister's tears, saying, "Mom told us we have to keep a secret. She said if we tell anyone, we'll get into big trouble." Trevor reassured them, though his heart was pounding. "You can tell me anything," he said, staying calm on the outside. Emma confessed between sobs. "Mom said Uncle James is our real daddy, but that's not true, Daddy. We don't even look like him." Sarah clutched Trevor's shirt with her small hands and added, "She also said we couldn't tell you because it would hurt you so much." Trevor gathered them both in his arms. His military training helped him maintain composure despite the fury building inside. "Listen to me, both of you. You are my daughters, and nothing anyone says will ever change that." Emma's voice trembled. "Are you going to tell Mommy we told you?" Trevor replied softly, "No, sweetheart. This is our secret now. Sometimes keeping secrets is wrong, but other times they protect the ones we love. Right now, we need to protect each other. Can you be brave for me?" The girls nodded, their tears slowly subsiding. Trevor stayed with them until they fell asleep, their little hands still clutching his shirt. Only then did he let the weight of their revelations hit him. Back in his office, Trevor activated every surveillance system he had set up. The cameras at James's house showed Candace's car in the driveway on a night she claimed to be at a client dinner. He pulled up the audio feed, where Candace's voice came through clearly. "We just need a little more patience," she said. James, sounding smug, replied, "There's only a month left on the 2-year non-compete clause, and your brother Marshall has made sure Trevor won't be able to challenge it." Trevor's hand tightened on the mouse. His own lawyer and Candace's brother were involved in this conspiracy. The betrayal ran far deeper than he had imagined. James's voice came through again. "I'm tired of waiting while Candace gets so suspicious. But let him suspect all he wants. By the time he figures anything out, it'll be too late. $8 million, baby. We can take the girls somewhere nice. He'll never find them, and the girls worship him," Candace mocked. "It's always daddy this, daddy that. How pathetic." Trevor started a new file on a secure server labeled Operation Clean Slate. The first entry was the surveillance transcripts, which proved the conspiracy for murder and insurance fraud. He added the girls' testimonies about being lied to regarding their paternity. Finally, a quick check of Candace's bank accounts showed she was never depositing enough to trigger any alerts. The plan was so meticulously crafted that it could only fall apart if Trevor became aware of it. However, over time, significant sums were gradually accumulating. The classic tradecraft was poorly executed. She had undoubtedly picked it up from James, but neither of them had received the level of training that Trevor had. James Willard's background was genuine, not the superficial identity he had shown Candace years ago when he first told her about his history. 3 marriages, 3 deaths, 3 insurance payouts, each under a different name, each death ruled accidental. James was clever, but his overconfidence was starting to show cracks. The final piece fell into place when Trevor discovered the connection between James and Lorraine. It became clear that their introduction at a charity event years ago wasn't spontaneous. They had known each other for years, collaborating on other insurance scams led by Lorraine. Candace was handpicked and groomed for this role. "You should have stuck to smaller targets, James," Trevor muttered, adding Lorraine's involvement to his evidence file. Just then, a message from Candace popped up on his phone. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." Trevor smirked coldly and replied, "No problem. The girls and I will manage." Trevor opened his laptop, shifting his military training from defense to offense as he started typing. They wanted to play games? He would show them what a real operator could do. The pieces were now in place. It was time to spring the trap. As Trevor monitored the latest meeting between Candace and James through his laptop, he noted how their arrogance was becoming their downfall. They hadn't even bothered checking the cameras at their usual meeting spot in a secluded corner of Woodland Park, where Trevor's recently installed equipment had excellent sight lines. "I've never seen anyone so careless," remarked Zachary Butler, the private investigator Trevor had hired a week ago. Butler, seated across from Trevor, had the seasoned face of a man who had spent over 20 years catching people at their worst. "Your wife really believes she's being subtle with those bank transfers, but subtlety was never her strong suit," Trevor responded, adjusting the audio feed. "What did you find on James's background?" Butler pulled out a thick file. James Willard is actually James Wesley Williams, who was previously known as James Warren Wilson and James Wallace. The man clearly has a thing for alliteration. He laid out 3 death certificates, 3 marriages, 3 tragic accidents, 3 insurance payouts. Different states, different names, but the same M.O. Trevor studied the documents closely. "How did I miss this in the background checks?" Butler responded, "Your sister didn't. Lorraine helped him craft his current identity. She has connections in county records offices across 3 states. We found emails between them going back 7 years. Butler's expression darkened. "They've done this before. Your wife wasn't their first target, just the most ambitious one." Trevor leaned back, processing this information. Butler explained that there were 2 other insurance scams involving wealthy but low-profile middle-aged men, both ruled as accidental deaths. Butler hesitated before adding that their 3rd attempt had failed because the target's daughter became suspicious and took her concerns to the police. "And Lorraine," Butler continued, "she's the connector. She finds the targets, introduces James to dissatisfied wives at charity events, and takes a cut for her services." Butler pulled out more photos of Candace. "She meets her twice a month at the Four Seasons Spa, where only smartphones are allowed. But luckily, I have a favor from the spa director." After Butler left, Trevor requested recordings of those meetings and reviewed the morning surveillance footage. The twins were now attending their real school, and there were no more play dates at James's house. Trevor had ensured that Candace didn't object to their new morning routine. Candace had initially resisted, but Trevor had simply mentioned the recent news of a child abduction. She was unaware that her own actions had set her phone on a collision course with disaster. Meanwhile, Marshal Huffman requested a meeting regarding a new government contract. Trevor smirked coldly. His brother-in-law was clearly panicking now. Huffman and associates occupied the 15th floor of a high-rise building downtown. Marshall's corner office offered a spectacular view of Puget Sound, paid for by billable hours and betrayals. Trevor gripped Marshall's hand tightly as they shook, his smile too wide. "Thanks for coming to discuss this," Marshall said nervously. "It's 10 a.m. and you're already asking about drinks?" Trevor replied with a knowing grin. Marshall fidgeted with his tie, sweating as he looked at the contract documents Trevor had laid out. A recorder sat on the desk, its red light blinking ominously, making Marshall's face go pale. "What is this?" he stammered. Trevor replied calmly, "Insurance fraud, like forged signatures on life insurance policies." Marshall slumped back into his chair. "Trevor, I can explain. How I helped your wife and her lover alter your life insurance policy without your knowledge? Or how I've been skimming payments from their previous scams through your firm's client accounts?" Trevor's voice remained steady. "Marshall, if you hadn't helped, they'd have killed you. James has dangerous people, and Lorraine, you have no idea what she's truly capable of." "But I do," Marshall pleaded. Trevor's tone stayed cold but calm. "That's exactly why you're going to tell me everything, every detail of their plans and all their past actions. As far as they know, this meeting is about the DoD contract. But if you don't start talking now, these recordings will go straight to the Bar Association and the FBI." For the next 2 hours, Marshall detailed every scheme, contingency plan, and scam they'd orchestrated, revealing more than Trevor had already known. Occasionally, Trevor would prompt him with questions, making it clear he already knew much of the story. In the end, Marshall was practically begging to help build the case against them. "What should I do now?" he asked desperately. "You're not going to do anything," Trevor said, standing up. "Stay scared, stay cooperative, and most importantly, stay silent." Trevor leaned in closer, his eyes cold. "And Marshall, if anything happens to my daughters, I'll assume you warned them. Are we clear?" Marshall nodded, sweating profusely, his collar damp. Trevor reviewed the DNA test results that Butler had obtained. The twins were indeed his daughters, not that he ever doubted it. Candace's lies about their paternity, orchestrated with James, were just another manipulation to secure her loyalty to the scheme. Just then, Trevor's phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "We should talk about your wife over lunch tomorrow. Sophia Cha." Trevor had been expecting this. Sophia Chun, Candace's so-called friend, had been watching him all week. Butler's background check had revealed her connections to James's previous scams. She was their cleaner, the one who handled loose ends. Trevor replied to the message, setting up a meeting at Cafe Lotus. At exactly noon, Sophia arrived, dressed in expensive clothes, but the attempt at a sympathetic smile never reached her eyes. "Mr. Roth, thank you for meeting with me," she said, sliding into the booth. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news," she began. Trevor didn't interrupt her, but instead said, "Tell me how long you've been working for James Willard or whatever his real name is." Sophia's smile faded instantly. "I don't know what you mean," she replied. "Like you didn't know Michael Chin in Oakland? Your late husband whose life insurance payout was so generously awarded to you?" Trevor laid out photos on the table. "Sophia, before you try to blackmail me about my wife, consider what else I might know." Her hands trembled as she reached for her purse. "The gun in your bag is registered to a Sandra Park in Portland, the same Sandra Park who witnessed the suspicious death of James's second wife. Interesting coincidence, don't you think?" Trevor continued in a slow, controlled tone. "Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave this restaurant, pack your bags, and disappear. If I ever see you again, every police department investigating James's past accidents will get an anonymous tip." Sophia's face turned white. "They'll kill me," she stammered. Trevor's cold reply came, That's not my problem. But cross me, and I'll make sure they do. As Sophia left, Trevor called Butler. If she contacts anyone, I want to know by tonight. With that handled, Trevor moved to the next phase of his plan. He reached out to his former military intelligence contact, Ray Manning, who now specialized in creating new identities for witness protection. Jesus, Trev, Ray said after hearing the situation. Getting your own sister's family involved? This is complicated. Trevor reviewed the new identities, ensuring the documents were in order. These look solid. How soon can you set up the vault? The house was now fully ready. The coastal property was completely stocked and off the grid. The girls would love the private beach. Not yet, Trevor said. I need to finish this first. Butler suggested, Are you sure we can't just make them disappear now? It would save you a lot of trouble. Trevor considered this straightforward approach. It was certainly tempting, but he shook his head. No, they need to face justice. The girls need to see what it looks like. Butler confirmed. All right, everything's set. The plan goes into effect next week. Trevor systematically transferred the assets into secure accounts of the shell companies Butler had set up. He used Marshall's insider knowledge to cancel the insurance policies, ensuring the changes couldn't be reversed. Candace noticed the financial shifts faster than Trevor had expected. One evening, she came home to find her phone logs filled with frantic calls from James. Trying to keep things casual over dinner, she asked, Did you make some changes to our accounts? I was trying to pay some bills today. Trevor responded smoothly. Just updating our portfolio. The new contract required additional security measures. Oh, she said, pushing her food around her plate. You really should keep me in the loop on these things, like you keep me informed about your meetings with James, he added casually. Her fork clattered against her plate. The twins, sensing the tension, looked up in surprise. Girls, why don't you finish your dinner in the game room? Trevor suggested calmly. Once they left, carrying their plates, Candace tried to regain her composure. James is just a friend. Stop! Trevor's voice was ice-cold, with a controlled fury underneath. You're not as clever as you think you are. Neither is James. Or maybe I should call him James Wesley Williams. Candace's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. Oh, really? Then why did you tell our daughters that he's their real father? Why did you let him convince you that this entire scheme was worth it? The house is now fully ready. The coastal property is completely stocked and entirely off the grid. The girls will love the private beach, Butler reported. Not yet, Trevor replied. I need to finish this first. Butler suggested, Are you sure we can't just make them disappear now? It would save you a lot of trouble. Trevor thought about it briefly. The straightforward approach had its appeal, but he shook his head. No, they need to face justice. The girls need to see what's right and wrong. Butler nodded in agreement. All right, your call. Everything's set to go into effect next week. Trevor systematically transferred assets into secure accounts tied to the shell companies Butler had set up. Using Marshall's insider knowledge, he canceled the insurance policies to ensure the changes couldn't be reversed. Candace caught on to the financial changes sooner than Trevor had expected. One evening, she came home and found her phone logs filled with frantic calls from James. Trying to sound casual over dinner, she asked, Did you make some changes to our accounts? I was trying to pay a few bills today. Trevor responded smoothly, Just updating our portfolio. The new contracts needed extra security measures. Oh, she said, pushing her food around on her plate. You should keep me informed about these things, just like you keep me updated on your meetings with James, he added with a sharp tone. Her fork clattered onto the plate, and the twins, sensing the tension, looked up with wide eyes. Girls, why don't you go finish your dinner in the game room? Trevor suggested calmly. Once they left, carrying their plates, Candace tried to regain her composure. James is just a friend, she said softly. Stop it. Trevor's voice was cold, with barely controlled fury simmering beneath the surface. You're not as clever as you think you are. Neither is James. Or should I call him James Wesley Williams? Candace's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. Really? Then why did you tell our daughters that he's their real father? Why did you let him convince you that betraying me was the right thing to do? Trevor, I'll fix everything. Please listen, she cried as she approached him. I can explain. Save it for your lawyer, Trevor said coldly as he stood up. Oh, and Candace, if you try to run, if you try to take my daughters, remember, I know everything about your plan. It won't be hard to find you. He left her sobbing or maybe shaking in anger at the table. It didn't matter anymore. Through Marshall, Trevor ensured Candace would know about the upcoming business trip to Big Sur. The trap was nearly set. Late that night, Butler called. Sophia reached out to James and we've got everything recorded. They're panicking and making mistakes. Keep recording. I want every word, Trevor instructed. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. James and Candace were now researching poisons and planning the coastal route. Every purchase, every search, and every conversation was documented and added to Trevor's growing evidence file through Marshall. The coastal fog over the Big Sur cliffs was thickening, a perfect cover for an accident, Trevor noted as he watched the weather report. Ray Manning confirmed, Your timing couldn't be better. Butler's team had spotted Candace and James loading equipment into their car. The brake fluid removal kit was purchased 3 days ago, Trevor noted on his laptop. It's all amateurish, but potentially deadly, Ray said, shaking his head. They were never criminal masterminds. Trevor sent an encrypted message to Detective Cohen. Make sure everything is recorded. Candace and James had no idea they were walking into a trap. Trevor checked his watch, ensuring that this time there would be no escape for them. They had done this before, but never with an audience like this. Trevor ordered the spotlights to pierce through the fog. Police vehicles hidden nearby sprang into action, and Cohen's voice boomed through the megaphone. Police! Drop your weapons and put your hands where we can see them! The look of shock on Candace's face was almost comical. James, showing quicker instincts, tried to run straight into the waiting arms of 2 officers. In his left jacket pocket were vials of nerve agents. Trevor informed Cohen, who instructed the officers to check the trunk for the brake fluid removal kit. Trevor watched the scene unfold through the live feed, listening to Candace's panicked voice. This is all a mistake. We were just out for a midnight drive. Cohen approached with handcuffs, catching them red-handed with the nerve agents and brake line cutters. Quite an interesting choice for a romantic evening, he quipped. I want my lawyer, Candace demanded. Oh, you mean Marshall Huffman? He's already given us his statement, Cohen replied with a cold smile. It's surprising what people confess to when faced with conspiracy to commit murder. James tried a different approach. You've got nothing solid on us. Just circumstantial evidence. Cohen signaled to the tech team to recover the hidden devices. We have much more than that. Your entire conversation about the brake lines and insurance payouts, captured from multiple angles with crystal-clear audio, Cohen responded. Trevor watched as realization dawned on Candace's face. Trevor, she whispered. He knew. Oh, he knew. Cohen confirmed that they also had evidence of James's previous victims, 3 dead wives across 3 states. Did you really think you were special, Mrs. Roth? Cohen taunted as they separated Candace and James into different cars. They had once promised each other a new life. But Trevor felt no satisfaction, only a cold certainty that justice was being served. The evidence Butler had gathered was overwhelming. Recorded conversations, documents, money trails, forged paperwork, and now the murder tools caught in action. When the trial began, it was swift and decisive. Trevor attended court every day, his military posture straight, his expression unreadable. The prosecution presented a systematic case, each piece of evidence tightening the noose. Marshal Huffman's testimony, given in exchange for a reduced sentence, was especially damning. He revealed every detail of the conspiracy, the forged documents, money laundering, and years of careful planning. "Mr. Huffman," the prosecutor asked, "why did you agree to help modify Mr. Roth's life insurance policies without his knowledge?" Marshall, wiping the sweat from his forehead, replied, "James Willard, or Williams, or whatever his real name is, had evidence of other illegal activities. My sister Lorraine introduced us and said it would be easy. Just sign a few papers, update some policies. By the time I realized they were planning a murder, I was in too deep. And Mrs. Roth? She was the mastermind. She altered the policies, moved funds into secret accounts, even used the girls as cover for her meetings with James." Candace's testimony was a masterclass in self-pity. She took the stand in a modest outfit, tears ready to flow. "I was manipulated," she claimed in a trembling voice. "James told me he loved me, that Trevor didn't appreciate me. He promised we would raise the girls together." The prosecutor cut in. "Then why did you tell your daughters that Mr. Willard was their real father?" Candace hesitated. "I never did." The prosecutor responded, "We have recordings, Mrs. Roth, where you instruct your 8-year-old daughters to lie about their parentage and discuss their future after their father's planned death. Would you like us to play them?" Candace's carefully constructed facade began to crumble as the evidence played out before her. "They're better off without me," Candace thought, convinced that she only cared for her precious daughters and her important work. "James understood me," she muttered. "James understood the insurance payouts." The prosecutor responded coldly, "Just like he understood his previous 3 wives, all of whom died under suspicious circumstances." James's testimony was even worse. He attempted to escape during a recess, only to tumble down half the courthouse steps before security apprehended him. This added more years to his sentence. When Lorraine realized her role was exposed, she immediately blamed her co-conspirators. "It was all James's idea. I just made introductions," she claimed. "Introductions that led to 3 deaths," the prosecutor noted sharply. "And tell me, Miss Huffman, how much did you earn for each successful introduction?" The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, delivering their verdicts like hammer blows. James Willard Williams, guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, and multiple counts of insurance fraud, sentenced to life without parole. Rachel Collins, found guilty of endangering minors, fraud, and conspiracy, sentenced to 25 years. Lorraine Huffman, guilty of conspiracy and aiding in fraud, sentenced to 15 years. Marshall Huffman received 5 years for his cooperation. Sophia Chun was caught trying to flee the country and faced charges for her involvement in past murders. Throughout it all, Trevor remained focused on his daughters. They slowly processed their mother's betrayal through therapy. Using assets seized from James's failed plans, Trevor bought a secluded coastal home in Maine, offering a fresh start. 5 years later, Trevor stood on the beach, watching 13-year-old Emma and Sarah explore the tide pools. The girls were thriving in their new life, learning that family wasn't about blood, but about trust and safety. That morning, Detective Cohen's annual update arrived. Candace and James's final appeals had been denied. Their 25-year sentences were upheld. Trevor had filed for divorce the day after their arrests, ensuring that all assets were safeguarded for his daughter's future. "Dad," Emma called out, "come see what we found." Trevor went down to where his daughters were examining the tide pools, their faces glowing with excitement. They had learned to laugh again, to trust again. Most importantly, they had learned that justice, though cold, was far more satisfying than revenge. The only reminder of their past was a small box in Trevor's office, containing the evidence that had sealed their mother's betrayal. He kept it as a reminder of what they had lost, but also of how he had protected his daughter's future, ensuring that evil was never left unpunished. 10 years later, Ethan Collins stood by his office window overlooking Portland's waterfront, reading Detective Cohen's latest annual report. It had been a decade since the trial that exposed one of New England's most meticulously planned insurance fraud conspiracies. The report began. Rachel Collins, inmate number 24,739, appeal unanimously denied by the highest court. Psychological evaluations confirm continued manipulative behavior, including attempts to influence younger guards. Despite overwhelming evidence, she continues to claim innocence. Current location, maximum security wing, Central Correctional Facility. Trevor scrolled down to the section on James Willard Williams, inmate number 24,740. Has attempted to escape 3 times, adding 5 more years to his sentence. Families of past victims have filed civil suits after new evidence was uncovered, resulting in 2 additional murder charges in California. He is likely to spend the rest of his life in prison. A knock at the door interrupted his reading. Zachary Butler, now chief investigator for Roth Security Solutions, entered with a thick file. His hair was grayer, but his investigative instincts were as sharp as ever. "Quarterly report on our special surveillance cases," Butler said, placing the file on Trevor's desk. "Thought you'd want to see this first." Trevor opened the file to find surveillance photos from the Central Correctional Facility and visitor logs. Candace, wearing her prison-issued uniform, was seen sitting across from a familiar face, Lorraine. Trevor raised an eyebrow in surprise. His sister had served 8 years of her 15-year sentence, released early for good behavior and cooperation in solving James's previous crimes. She had tried to visit Candace 3 times in the past month. Butler confirmed that Candace had refused the first 2 visits, but the third one lasted exactly 6 minutes before Candace lashed out, accusing Lorraine of ruining her life. Any attempt by Lorraine to contact the girls was immediately blocked. Emma and Sarah's security team was instructed to return any letters unopened. "She's trying her usual 3-step manipulation strategy," Butler noted, claims of redemption, apologies, and promises. But the girls had made it clear any letters would be returned without being read. Trevor nodded in agreement. Emma and Sarah were now 18 years old, young women who had grown beyond their painful past. They had grown into remarkably strong and resilient young women. Over years of therapy, they had processed their mother's betrayal. Mr. Roth, with Detective Cohen's support, had emerged stronger instead of bitter. "Here's the update on your meeting," Cohen, now promoted to Chief of Detectives, said. His recent promotion added not just authority but also weight to his words. Using his new position, he established a specialized unit focused on complex financial crimes and homicides, a career built on the Roth case. "So, college starts next month," Cohen said. "Sarah is headed to Yale to study criminal psychology, and Emma is going to MIT for computer forensics." Trevor's voice was filled with pride. "They want to help other families recognize the warning signs." Cohen nodded. "You didn't miss anything. You watched over them and took action. That's why you're safe and they're behind bars." Cohen pulled out his tablet. "Would you like to see Candace's latest prison report?" The report detailed Candace's latest scheme, where she attempted to manipulate a young guard into delivering messages to James. However, the guard was actually part of an integrity test, and all her messages were immediately added to her file. Her privileges were revoked for 6 months. "She hasn't changed," Trevor noted. "I've seen people like her before." Cohen scrolled further. "On the other hand, James's condition is worsening. The psychiatrist's report shows that his narcissistic tendencies have fully developed into psychopathy. He's been linked to 2 deaths inside the prison, but nothing has been proven." Marshall was released last month, Cohen continued. "The Bar Association permanently disbarred him, but he's now working as a paralegal in Arizona, supposedly helping detect insurance fraud as part of his so-called redemption tour." Trevor thought about his former brother-in-law, who chose survival over loyalty. That night in Big Sur, Marshall's decision to turn on his co-conspirators had ensured maximum sentences for the others. Sophia Chun's trial begins next month, Cohen went on. The evidence you gathered on her involvement in James's previous murders was crucial. She's looking at 20 years to life, provided she keeps her record clean. Surprisingly, she's now working at a women's shelter in Oregon, counseling victims of domestic abuse, claiming she's trying to help others avoid her mistakes. There was a hint of skepticism in Cohen's tone. We're still monitoring her communications, but so far, she's adhering to all parole conditions. Trevor reviewed the latest report from his daughter's security detail. Emma and Sarah were currently enjoying a weekend sailing trip with friends. Their tracking devices showed them safely within designated areas. Trevor maintained strict security protocols, not out of paranoia, but due to hard-learned experience. The girls want to meet with Candace, Trevor said quietly. One last time before heading off to college. Cohen raised an eyebrow. Are you considering it? Maybe they need closure, Cohen suggested. Their therapists agree. They're not afraid anymore. She manipulated them when they were kids. Now they're adults. The meeting with Candace was scheduled for the following week. Trevor watched through the prison observation window as his daughters prepared to face their mother for the first time in 10 years. Candace had tried to appear as maternal as possible despite wearing her prison uniform. As soon as she saw them, she instantly started to cry. My children, I've missed you so much. Emma's voice cut through her theatrics. Save it, Mom. We're here to tell you something, not to listen to excuses. Sarah picked up where Emma left off. We've read all the trial transcripts. We know exactly what you and James planned. You just don't understand, Candace pleaded. I was manipulated. James convinced me. Just like you tried to manipulate us, Emma said with a voice as cold as ice. You told us that James was our real father, used us as cover for your murder plans, and forced us to carry the burden of your secrets, Sarah added. We were only 8 years old. 8, Mom. Candace quickly shifted her strategy. Her tears dried up almost instantly. Your father turned you against me. He poisoned your minds, she snapped. Emma cut her off. Dad never had to say a word. We had therapy. We learned about narcissistic personality disorder, about sociopathic behavior and manipulation tactics. It all sounded familiar. Sarah continued. We're not here for an apology. We came here to tell you that we fully understand who you are and what you are. We came to let you know that we're thriving, not despite you, but because of you. Candace's mask slipped, revealing her anger. Everything I did was for you, she insisted. But Emma stood firm. Everything you did was for yourself. We're our father's daughters. We learned early on how to spot lies. Trevor silently escorted his daughters out of the prison. The girls were no longer sad or afraid. They were relieved. Take us home, Dad, Sarah whispered. Their coastal home had become a fortress, a safe haven bought with assets seized from James's failed schemes. Trevor had expanded it over the years, integrating state-of-the-art security measures disguised as luxury features. The private beach was monitored round the clock, protected by advanced surveillance technology and trained personnel. Ray Manning, now the head of Trevor's security operations, had been instrumental in designing the security systems. He not only trained the girls in self-defense and situational awareness, but also taught them how to detect threats early on. Your father's so-called paranoia will keep you alive, he once told them. Emma and Sarah had taken these lessons to heart. Both had earned black belts in Krav Maga and were skilled in surveillance and counter-surveillance techniques. Trevor's security consulting firm, Roth Security Solutions, had grown into a reputable company specializing in uncovering betrayal and fraud. The firm's client list included high-net-worth individuals, corporations, and even government agencies concerned about internal threats. The latest project involved developing software to detect insurance fraud patterns similar to the ones James had used. Several insurance companies had already adopted it to prevent hidden potential murders. That evening, Trevor sat with his daughters on their private beach, watching the sun set over the Atlantic Ocean, painting the sky in golden hues. Emma and Sarah had developed their analytical skills in different ways, Emma through computer coding, and Sarah by delving into criminal psychology. They had learned how to live a full life while balancing vigilance with awareness. Meanwhile, Candace was once again trying to play the victim in prison. Butler reported that she had immediately requested a meeting with her lawyer, claiming emotional distress. On the other hand, James remained in solitary confinement. New evidence had reopened 5 cold cases related to his previous wife's murders, and now 3 states were competing to see who would prosecute him first. Trevor reviewed the final report from Cohen and felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that justice had finally been served. As he prepared to send his daughters off to college, he was confident that they were now fully capable of protecting themselves. The next morning, Trevor received a letter from Marshal Huffman. His former brother-in-law had sent occasional updates about potential insurance fraud cases he had encountered in his paralegal work. But this letter was different. "I know I can never fully atone for what I've done," Marshal wrote. "But if developing this fraud detection program can help prevent others from committing the same crimes I did, would you be willing to review it?" Trevor shared the letter with Cohen, who had become more than just a colleague over the years. Their shared commitment to justice had formed a strong bond. "People can change," Cohen said, "but people like Candace or James, they went too far to ever turn back." Trevor nodded in agreement. He had learned that vigilance was never wasted. That evening, Trevor reviewed the latest report one last time before joining Emma and Sarah for dinner. The reports confirmed what he had always believed: justice, served cold, was far more satisfying than hot-blooded revenge. But in the end, she had only deceived herself. Her sister chose greed over family, but in doing so, she unintentionally taught him what family truly means. His daughters not only survived their mother's betrayal, but transformed that experience into a source of strength and understanding, turning it into a determination to help others. They were living proof of his greatest triumph: that one can face darkness without being consumed by it, that betrayal can be conquered. The setting sun cast shades of gold and shadow over his coastal home. Emma and Sarah laughed as they talked about their college plans, their voices filled with the confidence of young women who knew they were loved, protected, and strong enough to face whatever challenges awaited them. Trevor smiled with contentment, knowing that his calculated decisions had granted his daughters a priceless future, free from their mother's poison. They were now stepping into a life built on truth rather than lies, with the firm belief that justice, though sometimes slow, is ultimately inevitable. And so, another story comes to an end. What are your thoughts? Share them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing to join our community for more stories like this. It means the world to us. Check out the recommended videos on your screen, and I'll see you there.